Hey guys, welcome back to another video, and today in this video, we're going to be talking about Batman v Superman. This is the second installment to our reviewing thing, and I've gotten some requests to essentially give it a rating afterwards, so I'm going to be doing that. So, first off, let's talk about the premise of the movie itself and how it fits into the DCEU. I really don't think that this movie should have been included because we don't care about the characters yet. We've only had one movie with Superman, and this is our first movie with Batman. And even so, he's still co-starring with Henry Cavill, so it really feels like, we don't care about them fighting because we haven't gotten to know these characters. And so it really creates this big disconnection, I guess, between the audience and what's going on, because we don't really care about what's going on. And if you have a movie and someone watches it and they tell you that they didn't care about what was going on, that's a really bad sign, because you need your audience to be invested in it in order for it to be entertaining. And if they're not going to be invested in it, then it's not going to be engaging at all. But yeah, so I do not think that this should have been made this time. We should have gotten more time to learn about, our other characters, like Batman, Wonder Woman, Flash, Cyborg, Aquaman, whoever else. And obviously we did take time to learn about Batman, but we never got to know what he was like. There was no segment where we got to, understand, oh yeah, so that's who Batman is. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. It was more of just Batman doing things and no reason why. And you should never have a movie where you just explain to your audience what happens. You always need to explain why something happens and make stories 10 times more compelling and interesting and engaging, because we can connect with what's going on, because it's been explained to us. I also think that this whole story was played off as tragic, because it's like these two characters that we love, and we see each other as friends, and then essentially now we have to see them fight. That's what they thought it was going to be like, but in the truth of the matter, the fact is that we don't care about any of these characters, because we haven't gotten any time to know them. And that's why I think that the whole entire movie at this point in time shouldn't have even been here. It should have been way farther down the line. Now, the beginning action scene with Bruce Wayne, trying to help people out, and it takes place at the end of Man of Steel. I really liked that segment. It really helped connect the two worlds, and showed what was happening from a different perspective. And it really justified Batman's reason to take down Superman. However, Superman's motivations weren't as good. You see, Superman, we never really got to see why he doesn't like Batman. There was this really tacky scene that was just tacked off at the end, right before the beginning part, where where Batman fights Superman, where basically Superman's mother was held hostage and he has to fight Batman. That was a really weak motivation. It can't be something where it's he doesn't agree deep down. It should have been yeah, I'm all for being a Batman. That's the only way to make it intense. And there was a scene where basically Superman, he was watching the news, and basically Batman was branding people and marking them just to show the criminals that hey, this guy, be scared. And so Lex Luthor hired a bunch of people to kill everyone who had a bat mark. That way people think, oh yeah, Batman is trying to brand people to kill them. So people are like, oh, this guy's a killer, which he already is, which didn't make any sense. And so then, people would hate him. And then Superman saw this on the news, and he's like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. But the thing is that it's it got cut out of the film. And either way, Batman still kills people. So Lex Luthor's whole plan was kind of useless, if you think about it. And I really feel it was very dull and not fun because of all the cut scenes. But yeah, and I really liked the action scenes though. They were really engaging and they were choreographed really nicely, probably 10 times better than the MCU movies. They were really good choreography, in those terms, and I really think that I would like to see more of that. Every single like moment, was breathtaking in the action sequences. It was really entertaining just to see like a good depiction of like a fast paced Batman action scene, and that was really nice. But what wasn't nice was the villain of the movie, or villains if you're gonna count Doomsday. Doomsday was one of those Solomon Grundy characters where basically he was there and he was the bulk and like, he's a big bulk of like the villain segment, but he doesn't have like that much of a brain. He's kind of like Bane in that old Batman movie. We don't talk about that one though. But, anyways, so it's like it got really, I guess, bland because the villain, in when I'm talking about Lex Luthor, I didn't really care that he wasn't that loyal to the comics just because it didn't stray away from his character that much. It kind of did. He was more played off as a more quirky character, even though Lex Luthor is like this big evil schemy guy. But that was okay with me just because a lot of his core aspects were still intact, unlike Superman. We never got clear motivations as to why Lex Luthor hates Superman. We just got that one conversation where Lex Luthor's like, oh yeah, Superman, he's like causing damage, He agrees with Batman. If anything, he should be helping Batman and not trying to get Superman to hate Batman, And it didn't make any sense, but I really feel like Lex Luthor, he didn't have any personal connection, so it didn't feel like he was that passionate about it. It felt like he was just doing it for no reason, and that's why I didn't really like him as a character in the movie. And then he starts like doing this like weird thing where he's talking about Darkseid at the end, or something like that, and like there's never any explanation as to how he knows that's gonna happen, and like people are always like, oh no, but it's the fan service. But it's like, there's a difference between making fan service and making something not make sense. But yeah, and Doomsday, he was just there, and it was just disgusting to see Doomsday. It was terrible. The second, like, Doomsday was literally the worst part of this movie. I've literally never disliked a movie before. Every movie that I've watched has always been a 70 and up whenever I rate it. But this movie, this was the first movie that I was watching, and in the middle of watching, I'm like, wow, this is not enjoyable. I don't like this movie. And that is literally, that's a really hard feeling to depict, because I've never felt it before. Besides watching the Emoji Movie, but that was, like, later down the line. And so it was, like, it really felt like a letdown, and I knew that this movie was going to get bad, because I don't check the ratings of movies usually, or at least I didn't back then. Before I go watch a movie, I just like to be surprised, just to like kind of see just to form my own opinions on the movie first, before like some sort of bias gets like thrown upon me. I have to jump onto the bandwagon, I like to find out what happens. I knew that nobody was gonna like this film when I first saw it. It was terrible, and there was nothing really enjoyable about it except for the action sequences, but only the ones with Batman in it, because the other ones were just CGI sausage fests. I don't know why I said sausage fest, because that means there's a lot of boys, but that doesn't make any sense. I don't know, I just felt like saying it. So yeah. I'll talk about Wonder Woman. So Wonder Woman was randomly tacked on into this film, but I think that it made everything a little less rushed, in terms of Justice League, because Batman doesn't have to recruit Wonder Woman that way. So that was, she when she came in, her action sequences were actually pretty good. The only problem about her action sequences is that they were, the only ones that she had was with Doomsday, and Doomsday is the worst part of the movie, and Wonder Woman is one of the best parts. Now, we're gonna talk about the email scene. The email scene, the email scene, basically where Wonder Woman gets an email she gets a bunch of emails, like, with all the cool, crazy logos that Lex Luthor designed for them. And then it shows, like, a bunch of heroes that they should recruit. And then I feel like this should have been its own side quest of recruiting the heroes. Like, Batman and Wonder Woman go on this whole side quest. That would have been interesting instead of just having this one email scene, you know? I think it would have made the whole production and movie, like, a lot better because it's more engaging and enjoyable. Now we're going to be talking about Superman. Superman was relatively likable in Man of Steel. He's not likable in this movie. He was bland, boring, and just boring. Even more boring. His costume looked bland. It didn't seem real to me how boring this character was. It's Superman. He's one of the most interesting characters of all time, and yet he's so boring in this film. It baffles me because there's no possible way to mess up Superman unless you really don't know what you're doing. And so I think that Zack Snyder as a choice for director of, like, this whole entire franchise was just a bad idea in general. He doesn't have any experience with good superhero films. The only good films that he was hired for, I can't remember what they're called, but the reason that he was hired was because he made a few films, but he wasn't even the reason why they were good. So I didn't understand that. I mean, Zack Snyder is good at visuals, but he's not good at storytelling. And I think that that's the main problem. And speaking of Superman, when he dies and in the funeral, it was very boring. They dragged it on for like 8 solid minutes or something like that. Superman's dead. And they wanted us to be sad. They expected us to care, but we really didn't because we didn't get enough time to know him as a character. If you have, I'd say, like, only start, like, threatening to kill your characters, like, during the third movie, because that's, like, the third movie that your character's in, that's, like, when you start getting attached. But the thing is that Man of Steel was already at the wrong foot, so it kind of set us back. So I think that no matter how many films you have, if all of them are bad, we're not going to really care that much if your character dies. And, they dragged on the funeral, but nobody cared. And honestly, I could have sworn that, like, at least one person would have probably had to cry. Not because Superman died, but just because the movie was just so bad. It was such a letdown. And it was really disappointing because, everything was kind of just rushed, I guess, It's like they tried to fit one big MCU phase into one movie, which was this movie. And it was basically just a bunch of exposition and boring blandness and just, everything was really boring, I guess. And that's really how I could describe this movie in one word, which is boring. But yeah, and I did like how they set up, hope for the Justice League and how they're going to assemble them, but we all know how that turned out. So, yeah. I'm going to be reviewing Suicide Squad next. So, yeah. And I'm going to do all of the DCEU films, and then once I do Justice League, then I'll start doing some other films, maybe even Infinity War. Because, I want to jump on the bandwagon of reviewing that. Those are pretty good films, so, yeah. See you guys later. Peace out, Cub Scout. Oh, and by the way, guys, I forgot to do the rating, so honestly, I would give this movie a 50 out of 100, and that's bad. An average movie that I watch is usually about an 80 out of 100. So as you can imagine, this movie was not even a good movie standing on its own, minus all the hype, and I really feel like this movie was just a big disappointment, and I'm kind of tired of, movie franchises just screwing us over like this and just scamming us,